Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Hey, good afternoon. It is the 14th of August, and apparently our air quality is good. It feels great outside. Like, fantastic. It's not too hot. There's just enough humidity that, like, you know, the sinuses function. I'm saying this now. It's probably going to end up changing by the time we're done. So we've been a couple weeks ago we went to the Smokies, and on the way out we left right on the front end of gigantic rainfall where people died in Kentucky, and there was massive flooding throughout the state. And then, like, a week and a half later, a week later or so, we get back in the car and we drive to Virginia and drive through insane storms in the mountains, in both directions. You know, the same general areas. It was terrifying and thrilling, exhilarating, a lot of illings, and man, we were we were in an SUV, and it was loaded up with clothing and stuff. And on the way back, we had a vintage sewing table and sewing machine. And so, not trying to drive like crazy, of course. During these sheeting periods of rain, you know, we're talking like maybe 30 to 50 yards of visibility at times. People were passing us. I had my hazards on. I'm slowing down. I know you can't stop on an interstate in the mountains because of semis, but people were passing us. The only way that I could see the vehicle directly in front of me in the lane that was just out of visibility was because their hazards were also on. Fortunately, most people had their hazards on, and like the people passing. This shit blows my mind. I mean, obviously, they trust their vehicle and their tires way more than I do.
That's one of the reasons I just don't trust, traveling around other people. Is like, you can be traveling as safe as you possibly can, and then other people just have complete disregard for their own and everyone else's safety. And it's like, I don't know if it's because the car gives a false sense of safety, if they don't actually care, if they're just so automated in their routines that they're like not even realizing how dangerous it is to not drive slower. There's just so many things that could contribute to it that it's like, it's impossible to tell what, but none of them are good.
I mean, even the best automated systems can't predict the weather. They can't predict the road conditions. They can only react to telemetry.
Yeah. Well, and this is like, I don't know if you've ever done a train simulator, but having the chance to just like do a train simulator, now I see why they need operators.
Like a locomotive, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or I mean, like a subway car or like anything that is like on rails.
Yeah.
With the understanding of physics, and then how.
Well, there's a reason they're called engineers.
Right. Well, but then like the way that like the temperature of the tracks affect it, or the weather, it's like, these the necessity for a real life person is there, because automation just is going to have this gap where having a person who understands physics with eyes and hands on the controls will alleviate a lot of that gap. And that's kind of like, understanding that, I'm not sure a lot of Americans, well, I know for sure a lot of Americans don't grasp physics, but then when they're being taught stopping distances, I don't think they grasp why you're supposed to have like 500 feet or 300 feet between, certain types of vehicles when you're signaling for turning or stopping and shit like that.
I think people see the 70 to 0 times in the Car and Driver or Road and Track online, and they say, "Oh yeah, I can stop really fucking fast," and that's like with one driver and probably like a quarter tank of gas.
Well, and it's under optimal conditions.
And under optimal conditions, under controlled conditions. So, no load, nothing in the trunk, nothing in the back, nothing on a roof rack, nothing behind them. Like, no other human.
And assuming they hit the brake at the perfect time.
Yeah.
And don't turn the wheel and lock the brakes out. And there's all these things like anti-lock brakes are there so that the wheels don't lock up, and it's basically fluting the brakes. Whereas when people slam on the brakes, they don't have the wherewithal to flute the brakes.
Yeah, well, that's like an old driving technique. I think that somebody would have to be born like that. The window where those cars would have been available, those people were born at like at the end of the 70s and like at the very early 80s. Maybe like the first, like 1980 in the first like 3 months of 1981 would be the or maybe into May or something would be the group that might have been exposed to vehicles that didn't have ABS. But after that, like pretty much everything, I think in the 80s, like is when like GM started including anti-lock brakes on everything, and Ford did too, and so did Dodge, and everyone starts including ABS systems, and the culture changes from like pump the brakes to just stand on it.
Yeah, it's wild how that shit fucking changes so quickly when like technology emerges, and then suddenly all that shit that people were, you needed to do just to stop your vehicle no longer have to do it.
In fact, those things will cause problems.
Yeah.
Like all those, like the techniques, even the techniques that race car drivers use, if they were to apply those to a modern consumer daily driven vehicle, like a street car, it would be bad. It would just be bad. They'd probably drive the living crap out of it, but I mean, like the braking systems, the suspension, the way that all the traction control systems are designed to work. While they do take a lot of influence from racing development and engineering, this stuff is tuned for like normal driving applications, safe, reasonable driving applications, not like at the limit the whole time. So something I realized when I was driving around, we drove through 5 different states over the course of the last month. I think what has happened is, for the longest time, speed limits were 55 miles an hour. 65 miles an hour, and now we've got like 70 mile an hour speed limits and 75 and 80, and I think what happened
85 in Texas. Yeah,
I think what happened is, for the longest time 55 is actually reasonable, 60 is actually reasonable, 70 is a pretty decent passing speed, and in some parts of the country, like in the mountains where you're just coasting down the hill, you might go 70 miles an hour. Like, it's reasonable to have speeds that are consistent with the conditions of the road.
And these roads are just mostly straight, so that's another issue.
Yeah.
It's like we're not talking about like, winding.
Oh yeah, I mean
figure 8 loops and anything like that. They're just mostly straight.
They're mostly straight.
And the fact that they have to have the capacity to land a plane every 5 miles or something. So it's like,
they have to be able to field trucks. Big semis.
Yeah, that too. But and there's
so
like in the way that
they make sense.
Highway system. Sorry.
Well, the stuff makes sense, but some portions of the road, it seems like 70 miles an hour is, hey, this is like the absolute fastest you need to be going. Like in the Smokies or in the Appalachians, there's some sections of those roads where like 70 miles an hour is incredibly fast because of the grade of the road. And so, they say go 55, and I'm going 55 because that's how fast the trucks are going. And then, of course, someone just flies by easily
Well, I
going.
think one of the issues with those is like in some vehicles, you have to ride your brake to go 55, and that's not safe either.
Yeah.
So that there's like this element of vehicles that have drastically different coasting speeds at the same grade shouldn't be on the same road.
No, they
And
shouldn't.
that and this is like my perpetual problem with America's systems is that we have uh fucking like smart cars on the same roads as semis.
Yeah.
So those things should not be sharing the same road ever, let alone when the grade is 8%.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and then it gets worse because someone in their extra sized vehicle is coasting just a little bit faster than the semi, and they decide to pass the semi, and then, you know, essentially a shuttlecraft comes cruising along, and they're just like cruising along, and then all of a sudden the accordion builds, and everyone's cruising down the 7% grade, and we're all now able to read each other's bumper stickers.
Well, our country's infrastructure is just completely wrong
Yeah.
in every way. Like down to the entrance and exit lanes for highways being the same lane, or the Shamrock intersections where they have 4 loops at every one. There's like the way that our highways have been designed is perpetually stuck in 1940s and 1950s, when obviously there are way more vehicles, but the technology has also changed too. So there's a ton of things. But another issue is the same fucking people are driving. So a lot of the people who were on the roads then operating, a fucking Cadillac going 45 miles an hour because that's what they're used to. Well, now the cars go 85 miles an hour, and this person who's going 45, although historically that would be like in line with safety, it's like now things move faster because they can respond quicker. So if you're not paying attention and you're not able to respond quickly, that person shouldn't be on the road. And it's like, this is like the disparity of what is proposed for the sake of safety versus what exists for the sake of travel are at odds with each other. And then the government is in a place where they leverage those tension points to just make money instead of solving them. So it's like a lot of conflicted interest with the way our infrastructure is designed versus the needs of what it's meant to do. It's like when I'm getting in my car, I need to get to the place I'm going as fast, but also as safely as possible. So if I could get into my vehicle and drive in a straight line 200 miles an hour with no impedance or no risk of like something crossing the road and making it so I have to like immediately turn my wheel, that's completely different than driving on a road in which other people are present, and then obstacles can present themselves, and then weather can present itself. And it's like the speed limit is optimum conditions with no obstacles or no impedance
For the slowest vehicles on the road.
Obvious. Well, and it's like it's the upper limit, not the lower limit.
Yeah.
But there's also an implied lower limit that starts to cause danger. And as you're saying, like, you can't stop on the highway. You'll get in trouble. You'll get a ticket in
Or you'll
certain
get
spots.
rear-ended.
Like, I mean, it's like not even legal.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. Like, regardless of the
you can't-
danger,
you
it's
can't
like
go slower
you're
than
not allowed
45
to
miles an hour on the interstate. That's the
Yeah,
minimum speed limit. Below
Yep.
that, you can get a fine.
cited for danger to the flow of traffic.
Yeah,
And that's
anything
kind
from
of-
fine to be arrested with your vehicle impounded.
Yeah.
It's actually very serious. And
Well, and
I think
but this is
there needs to
again-
be like a gradient, that we need a much more comprehensive like interstate system if that's going to survive. I'm not
we also
actually
need-
advocating that it survive, but there needs to be some kind of distribution of lanes and speeds that actually make sense. There's not. I think there's like a diverse interstate driving culture that exists largely between like among vehicle size, but then even within a vehicle size, there are populations of people that'll drive faster than others. And so, when I noticed in certain parts of like Virginia, I noticed compact SUVs or crossover vehicles the most, and they were just like buzzing along. And I know why. They've got plenty of engine and they are fun to drive, and you got great visibility, and most of them feel like they're on rails. And so I get it. And the roads were kind of windy and fun. And then like we get to the mountains and that changes a little bit. We start seeing more trucks. And then in peak interstate, it's almost all trucks. Now it's like it's incredible. Like I used to wonder, it's like, where the fuck are these giant ass trucks coming from with their crazy trailers with cars on them and stuff? That are these like actually businesses? And then of course there is an entire like gig economy of dudes with their giant ass trucks that they have a business to own a giant ass truck so they can haul somebody else's stuff around. They're called hot shots.
But those things also have separate licenses, which should apply to
they got
SUVs, and it should apply to more horsepower than like the ratio of horsepower to vehicle weight should apply to should affect the license being given. And somebody who doesn't get that proper license shouldn't be able to go out and purchase that vehicle.
Yeah.
However, we're presented with this notion that if you have the money, you should be able to just go and buy it because of capitalism. When in reality, these things should be limited by ability to actually use them.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the ability to use them doesn't always align with the person's capacity to purchase. So then you get these people who just can go out and buy a Ferrari and then wreck it into a wall because they don't know how to handle the fucking torque. So it's, again, we have things in place that could solve it in the form of class licenses.
Yeah.
But for some reason, when it comes to civilian vehicles, we stop the class licensing and it's only to commercial vehicles.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any fucking sense.
You just reminded me, there was a guy not too long ago bought like a brand new Ford GT, the supercar, and immediately gave it the gas and drove it into like a palm tree outside of his Florida mansion, and his excuse was, I don't know how to drive manual transmission.
Man.
Wrecked one of the fastest cars that exists because he got in and didn't know how to operate a manual transmission.
And that's like, it's way more common than it should be.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
every so often on like one of those driving fail videos or interstate fail videos, there's some asshole in like a Lamborghini or a Maserati or a Ferrari who's pissed off because somebody in the Civic or Accord or Camry won't get out of their way because there's traffic, and they finally opens up and they give it the gas. Next thing you know, they're slamming into the median.
Yep.
And part of me is like, yeah, fuck that guy. They deserve that shit. And then there's a part of it that's like, man, a really amazing piece of engineering was just ruined. That sucks.
And that's what it gets. And that's kind of like, again, there's like this video of a guy in a Viper, at a stoplight. I think it's in Vegas, and he's, revving the engine. Somebody's next to him with the fucking camera, and he takes off, and just 2 seconds later, the car veers into a fucking pole, and the car is totaled. And it's like, there's a whole segment in Back to the Future that as to why this is fucking stupid. Every time people do it, it ends up in somebody covered in shit or the car fucked up. And it's like, obviously that's meant to be a lesson, but it seems like Americans just, it's like they revel in not learning lessons no matter how many times those lessons are presented to them. And for whatever reason, Americans still are obsessed with like super powerful straight line muscle cars, but also big SUVs, which they can feel fucking invincible in, but still don't understand neither of those things protect them. And it's like, I can't fathom how this far into those cultures that people still lean on those things for identity affirmation, when it's like it it doesn't do anything but prove that that person's needing some sort of identity affirmation, and then put them in a place where they're probably going to hurt themselves. Like very or make their situation worse off in the sense of like, yeah, if you have a supercar and you get a ton of tickets because you keep getting caught speeding, well, you're still hurting yourself. It may not be physically because you didn't get in a crash, but you're still
Yeah, eventually
hurting
they're going to take
yourself.
that license away,
Eventually, yeah.
or
Eventually.
or they'll take the car away and destroy it.
Yeah, either one eventually. And it's like that type of self-destructive, like irresponsible consumption for the sake of appearance. It's like, well, everyone knows that if you have a 200-mile-an-hour vehicle, unless you're going to a track, we know you can't drive it that fast legally. So what the fuck are you even doing with, so
Idling around.
pretty much. And that's kind of, again, it's like when everyone knows that the Lamborghini doesn't represent what it was meant to be. It's like that's not a street car. Even though it's street legal, it's a fucking track car. So if you're not driving it on a track and I see you driving a Lamborghini around town 30 miles an hour, it doesn't look cool anymore. It used to look cool.
It's just
It just
pathetic.
looks sad. It looks pathetic. It's like, oh, this person really is craving attention for some reason. They just want to be seen. And then it's like, you realize the only people who give that person their attention are other dudes who want attention. That's all it is. And it's like that's the thing you see with all these dudes on steroids and super huge. When they were given this propaganda that it was going to like make them more attractive to women, or it was going to make them like more viable as a partner, the people who believed it ended up doing all that stuff only to realize the only people it attracts are other people who think like that. They just want to learn, how did you do that? How did you get like this? And that's the only people that impresses. And it's like, I feel like I thought we had enough media about those things not impressing people, but I think a lot of dudes don't believe that, and then they see other people being like successful in relationships or successful as being charismatic, and then they just assume that it's because they have a Lamborghini or because they're wearing a suit or because of what that original culture was saying gave people those traits. And that's where I'm like, and I can't tell if it's marketing again or if it's just Americans being that stupid, or if like emotional intelligence is not as common as I thought. There's just so many things that this far into consumerism not actually working out for people the way it said. Like, what does it take? What does it take for people to realize this shit's not working? Because I'm looking at it right now. I was told that capitalism was going to bring me all this competition. You'd have people fighting to bring things to market. And I'm like, well, let me think about this, because in what I thought this was capitalism, I was told that I'd have people fighting each other to bring things, and then my choice would be so wide. Like, I have gone from one Batman movie every couple of years to 0 Batman movies every couple of years. And now it's like the way that it was presented, it was like, oh, organizations should be fighting and I should have 10 Batman movies at my like option of being able to consume them. But I have 0 Batman movies. And now we're about to have 0 Batgirl movies and 0 Flash movies. And they're canceling all these things that were supposed to be like what I thought capitalism innovating and bringing more creativity. But as I look around, it's like capitalism.
They didn't just cancel Batgirl or Batwoman, Batgirl. they shelved it. It's complete. It's done.
Yeah.
It's edited. It's
Yeah.
ready for release.
And the
That's
reason I say there's zero Batman movies is because Batman 2 has not yet been greenlit, and it's sounding like they're not going to greenlight it.
well, they were going to greenlight the Joker sequel, which
That's already greenlit.
Yeah,
That one is greenlit
they're going to do the Joker
with
sequel,
Lady Gaga.
but they're not going to do the Batman 2, and then they drop. Yeah,
All the animation, all the animation that was like, the animation was actually the best thing at DC,
yeah.
and which is like after seeing it's like they are trying to destroy their own product for whatever reason. But I thought capitalism was supposed to be having people fighting to bring us the best product ever.
Well,
they were supposed to be fighting each other to bring us Batman.
They
what
isn't? I thought capitalism itself projects that there is somehow scarcity within a market, so that's what allows for people to compete for our dollars. But the dilemma is that capitalism also exists within an infinitely growing market like Alibaba or Amazon, where we end up with 40 different versions of the same power strip or 15 different versions of the same stapler. They're all made in the same factory in Stapletown, China, where they manufacture the Slingerlands, but they don't say anything on them. But
I thought that's what capitalism was supposed to bring.
Well, that's what capitalism gave us. I think this is we're in like late stage consumer capitalism phase where they've done all the fighting and they've figured out, oh wait, we can just build onto this market. We'll expand the market with like an extra warehouse, and we'll just move more stuff in there. And when people find it, they'll just come in here and they'll get lost, because who has time to review 50 fucking staplers? The internet does, actually. And the internet will tell you, and they give you an updated list, and this is actually pretty interesting. So I've been casually watching affiliate marketing, because I'm curious about that stuff. I can't imagine how it actually makes money, but it does, because people open links and they click on the affiliate link, and that gives the affiliate 10 cents on the, or 5%, maybe 3%, 2% of the product is then put in their affiliate marketing account. And a lot of these web pages, they're just like updated for 2021, updated for 2022, updated for spring. They've got their format, and they just change a few parts of their website. But a lot of the time, they're like cookie cutter, carbon copies of the previous year's best of this category thing. And then there are virtual copies of these websites from what one might assume is different people blogging their product experience, but it's hard to believe that they're different when they have the same lists. Like but it's like best top 5 instead of top 7, or it's top 10, and they include a bunch of stuff that nobody actually is going to buy, but we want to know that it's crap. So we want to know that somebody is at least taking the time to buy it and evaluate it and say, oh yeah, this is totally crap, just don't do it. So there's a way that some people have managed to like stake out their own little spot in the economy, but it's not a good economy, because there's no actual competition, because when the market gets a little stiff, they just expand the market, and so there's more opportunity. You can't corner a market that doesn't have corners and keeps getting bigger. So they can't actually fight for us or our attention. And even if they could, man, we've talked about how there's so much music that you can't even listen to it all to find the good stuff anymore. You just have to rely on other people who specialize in curating a genre of music. And maybe you get lucky and you find a producer or a band. Oh man, do bands even exist anymore? You find a band that you really like, and you can listen to their music, but for how long?
Well, and in that context, were bands ever viable, or were they always a lie?
I think bands only existed because they didn't have the technology to do it all on their own.
Right. And part of it was like they were in a time when there was not as much content to get burnt out on the group as like individuals. So it was like, I mean, I guess I wasn't alive when the Beatles were, you know, the biggest, but I can only imagine that because there's only so many actual publications, like you can only walk by the Beatles being on like so many like magazine covers, and it's not infinite the way right now it feels like there's an infinite like amount of content that just devolves more and more, where it's like anything you can think of, the internet has probably thought of it and created it in some form. Like this morning I was making a joke about like Keenan and Kal-El instead of Keenan and Kel, like fucking, but the internet already thought of it. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's really funny to have this thing that is like the repository of everyone's creativity in a completely unfiltered and unindexed lake. But when you go sift through it, the better you are, then you realize like, fuck, everything's out there. It's just a matter of if you know how to access it or if anybody else knows how to access it. Because if nobody else has seen that Keenan and Kal-El fucking, and I say Kal-El because I think it's more hilarious to pronounce Kryptonian names without the hyphen, like Jarrell and Kal-El. Anyway, if nobody else saw the Keenan and Kal-El and I came out with it like first, then effectively, because that thing is occluded by other noise, it doesn't matter that somebody else thought of it. And that's where, on the one hand, original thought is seen as this like amazing thing concerning creation, but on the other hand, when there's so much information occluding novelty, original thought isn't as important so much as the ability for people to get something in front of others, which is where like a lot of times you'll see somebody who created a meme not be the one that gets like the viral credit for that meme being shared. And it's like, it doesn't matter who creates something, it matters who's good at proliferating that thing.
Yeah.
Concerning how it moves.
No, that's 100% accurate. That's why marketing firms exist.
Yeah. Oh my God, dude, I was thinking, this is like really insane. There's a large percentage of our American military that is marketing. In fact, like anything that's above 0% is fucking too much. But when you see how much propaganda and like fucking commercials for like the National Guard and the ROTC and the fucking Marines, like how much of our military budget goes to fucking marketing? It's goddamn insane. And in that regard, it's like, dude, if I pay taxes to a government that then has a military that then they have to fucking market to people like myself because they know I would never fucking join the military under my own accord. So they have to try to convince me. And they'll never work, but they're going to fucking try anyway because they need volunteers. Why don't they just give me that money in the first place that they fucking took from my tax dollars, spent on fucking marketing, and then never actually got any value from in me because I'm not fucking joining the goddamn military in any capacity. They could have just given me that fucking money from the beginning or never taken it. And it's like the way that our government just burns fucking money with marketing a military force that is a volunteer fucking force that they end up paying people for because nobody wants to do it. It's like the only people that appeals to are those who have to do it because they have no other option, or colonialists who are okay with how it actually plays out when our military just goes in and fucks shit up, takes their resources, and then uses that to pay the fucking soldiers that took the orders and fucked things up, and then came back and then didn't get taken care of because it was all a fucking lie. So that's where I'm like, seeing how this shit all plays out, it's only because there's so much money in marketing and so much involvement of the government, military influence on how Hollywood portrays it, that the only person in their right fucking mind, they don't have a right mind. Nobody in their right mind would go work for them. So that's why they have to fucking spend all that fucking money on marketing. And that's why I'm like, dude, just give me the fucking money. Stop marketing a fucking imperialist voluntary force to me or anybody else and just give me the fucking money. No, that's socialism. Nope, can't do that. That's communism. So it's marketing is like,
But
I'm really anti-marketing. I'm like convinced marketing is a fucking brain parasite. Marketing is one of the biggest plagues upon humanity in the last 200 years. And it's one of the things that give the most appearance of benign presence that has the most dangerous presence. Marketing is fucking dangerous.
man, that's like the whole point of the movie Branded. It's a
You said Branded? I haven't seen it.
yeah, it's a story about this Russian marketing executive where he kind of loses his mind and starts seeing brands as parasites that are just tapping into people's desires and feeding into people's desires, and it ruins culture. It ruins everything. He ends up like moving out to the country and burning everything. It's nuts. It's like it's one of the most direct anti-marketing branding statements that I think I've seen in like ever. And it's under the guise of a movie. It was definitely a lot of fun.
Huh. I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, it was very, very poorly marketed. I think it was on Netflix actually, very briefly, but I didn't watch it on Netflix. I saw it on F Movies.
Well, it's funny you make this allusion because I'm reading the synopsis, and it's like, man, how much of our science fiction in America casually uses Chinese or Russians as like mindless antagonists that are just antagonists because their government tells them to, in a way where I'm like, I can't ignore it. And it's like, it really bothers me now where I'm just like trying to enjoy a science fiction movie, and then suddenly Chinese hackers are the fucking only antagonist that you bring up. And then I'm like, why are the Chinese trying to fucking sabotage the American mission? Because the Chinese are worried that you're going to have this, and you're worried that the Chinese are going to have this. Why is this a plot point in a fucking science fiction movie when I came here to fucking see aliens? I came here to see aliens, and now you're making Chinese people who are clearly under duress. If the government's making them do this shit, well, that means they're fucking under duress. So why are you making them the bad guys? It's fucking, I'm like, Americans not realizing this shit is just littered in everything that they watch. That shit also bothers me, because then I'm like, I can't now. I mean, it's like before, when I was like a teenager, I could, but 39 years old, I cannot watch a fucking science fiction movie where a faceless Chinese person who's clearly under duress from the government by this narrative is just the hacking, trying to disrupt the American fucking savior of the universe narrative. And that's where I'm like, dude, how do people not see this shit? How does anybody see this shit and not get pissed off that some fucking faceless Chinese person is the antagonist? That shit pisses me the fuck off in 2022. I cannot watch a science fiction movie without then thinking about the meta problem of propaganda seeping into American science fiction so that science fiction ultimately becomes fucking propaganda. It's like maybe since Vonnegut? I don't know when's the last time science fiction was an American propaganda. I just watched 2010 made in 1984, not to be too many numbers, but it's all about the fucking Russians and Soviets being fucking trying to get in the way of American ideals. We're gonna save the fucking universe. And it takes a fucking goddamn like murderous fucking alien to save the human species from the fact that America can't stop portraying Russians and Soviets as antagonists to make it seem like when the fucking alien shot down the satellite and then American immediately said the Russians did it. It's like, dog, they did that shit in 1984 and we're still in 2022 pointing at Russians as our fucking, they're the fucking enemies of America. Oh my God, we are the goddamn empire. We're the fucking empire. How do people watch Star Wars and not see that we are the empire? People listen to fucking Dana White going to a Rage Against the Machine concert. Dana White, you are the fucking machine. How do you not understand that? This is like the cognitive dissonance of capitalism to take things that are meant to fight back and then consume them and swallow them up to the point that right-wingers didn't understand Rage Against the Machine was anti-right wing, and many of them still don't understand that. How did we get there? And I mean, it's like rhetorical because obviously it's like propaganda, but it's baffling, and it never ceases to amaze me how much propaganda is just fucking everywhere, and people just act like that shit. It's like fucking They Live, where I can see the propaganda, but like you and I and like the people in our circle, the only ones that can see it, we just have to pretend that we're like not aware of the propaganda, and we just have to operate as if like, oh yeah, we're not anti-imperialists, we're not anti-colonialists. No, we're going along with the capitalism. And it's like, I mean, it's just, again, like, I know in my heart it's because Americans never leave the country, and they never they think that traveling to a Walmart in a different state is like travel, but that it feels like we're on the last leg of that. It can't and the reason I know it's on the last leg, I don't know how many places you've seen recently, 24 hours. That 24 hour shit is gone. I feel like 24-hour businesses no longer being able to run 24 hours because of not worker shortage.
I mean, a gas
because they don't want to
station?
pay workers. Gas stations are like, even some of those aren't 24 hours anymore. Like the one on the way out of town, bro, that shit shuts down overnight. And this is where, again, when you have gas stations not able to operate 24 hours, fucking capitalism has peaked. And I think the irony is the people who believe that shit is like going to be the savior of the world will never admit to themselves that it has peaked, and they never will acknowledge anything that needs to change. But it's just a matter of, will they burn everything down and prevent everyone else from moving on?
Well, of course.
I'm like,
of course,
they'll try, and that's where.
Did you read about Mr. Musk himself going to China? He was invited to go to a technology symposium to speak about the future of technology and where it could lead humanity, and sustainability and all of these things. And so he gets up there and spends like the better part of an hour basically giving a commercial about Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink. And the whole time being translated because he doesn't speak Chinese. He's just talking about his products when he's at a symposium where they're talking about the future of technology. Not stuff that's already being built, not stuff that's already being developed now, but where it's going and how we're going to get there and how we're going to make it sustainable. And so he says a lot of the right things. You know, he believes in sustainable, forward-thinking technology. He believes in his technology. And where he might have been able to, like, you know, swindle the American government, I think the Chinese government's a little bit more ruthless when it comes to, like, you know, the people's money.
Oh yeah.
Like, if he doesn't,
you gotta have a fucking actual way to make returns, and it can't be just fluff.
Yeah. So this is going to be one of those moments where we might actually see a Chinese Tesla variation emerge that's like actually for the people, but it'll be made with, like, you know, the same stuff.
I mean, but they don't have control over the market over there, and it's like they're trying to break into the market, whereas
Oh no, I don't
over
mean
here.
I mean, like, there'll be like they'll be called like Shen Dao Feng and like
Oh yeah. That's. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the Chinese government like just straight up takes his factory after he doesn't fulfill all the contracts that he signed. He's not gonna fulfill fucking one because he never goddamn does, and he doesn't realize that he can get away with that shit in America. But the Chinese government will take his fucking factory if he like falls back on a few.
I mean, if he doesn't bring the Cybertruck to market, better believe they will.
Oh yeah,
it's gonna be on Alibaba in like 3 years.
Oh yeah. Well, I don't know if you've seen, like, you can order like a $2,000 electric truck from Alibaba now.
Yep.
In America, and obviously there's shipping involved. And it's not a great electric vehicle.
No,
but they fucking get that shit there before goddamn Cybertruck. So
I've seen a few of those unboxing videos. Like they'll go the speed limit. And they'll haul a bunch of crap.
I mean, they work fine, and it's like it's just a matter of, because it's just a super cheap vehicle. It's not, you know, there's not shocks in it. It's not there's no air conditioning.
I'm sure you can option them up to have that. I think the problem with a lot of them is like fully base at the base model, they're not optioned in a way that they could be licensed for road use in the United States. You have to option them up enough that they have like lights and turn signals and
Yep. Well, and that's like the video that I was it's a series of videos I was watching. The guys, he got it for his ranch or whatever, so it's not street legal, or it wasn't street legal, but then he modified it so it was, and it's like, yeah, I think it ended up costing him like $5,000 total. Whereas like, yeah, now he has a usable electric truck,
a brand new one.
I mean,
a brand new vehicle for $5,000.
It's very small. It's very small, but it does what it's meant to do, and he can haul things with it, just enough to make it like, you know, an actual electric truck.
It's a tool.
It does what it's meant. Yeah. It does what it says it does. Whereas if Tesla doesn't deliver working ones, and if they don't deliver any, they're gonna lose that fucking factory. I don't know what the term limit will be, but I fucking guarantee they're not gonna goddamn deliver. I guarantee it. It's just because they can't. If they can't do that shit here, nah, man. This is the market he knows, and this is the market he has most access in. He's
ambitious.
I mean, he's a foreigner here. He's way more a foreigner over there, concerning the way the market is going to treat him. They're not going to welcome him with open arms, not because of any specific reason other than the fact that he's not like part of the group. Like, you can't just waltz in and expect to get the same deals as the fucking companies that have been there perpetually. And it's like, he's gonna have to pay higher labor costs, he's gonna have to pay higher resource costs, fucking everything that everyone else is paying for, he's gonna have to pay higher because of international like taxation being extra on top of it, but just because he's an outsider and he's like breaking in. So I think he's not as smart as he's been portrayed, and he's taken way too many risks and over leveraged not only his organization, but he's over leveraged his representation, like his reputation. And at this point, his reputation is no longer viable as a form of credit in a way that it was 4 years ago or even 2 years ago, to the point that it's not going to protect his ventures the way it used to. And I'm loving seeing this happen, but I think it's hilarious for all the people who just mindlessly placed faith in this guy as like the next boy genius, fucking Steve Jobs, gonna change everything, who was also largely just an identity that was constructed. It's because they never did the research to understand why Steve Jobs wasn't who the media made him out to be. And then they bought this shit, and now they don't understand how the person they thought was out trying to preserve the environment with electric vehicles is suddenly a right winger.
I mean, it's kind of similar to what Steve did with Apple. You know, he could say a few words and tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people would go out and buy new pants. And the same thing happens with when Elon blurts some shit out. They freak out and they're like, "Oh no!" and they soil themselves and they have to go buy new pants every fucking time. And
It's a cult, man.
yeah,
It's a cult.
man, I wonder what brand of pants he's making the money on now. What does he call his menswear? Musk for men. No, that's like
Well, it's funny. I'll see people who are trying to sound smart and they'll adopt Elon's cadence and the way he speaks, and it's like, it's obvious you're doing that, right? Like, I think people are even especially Elon. I think that there's this notion of the savant that is horribly ableist, but also is rooted in this propaganda that people who have like some mental impairment may gain special abilities and become smarter than everybody else, even though they have this one thing. Oh, they can't read our emotions and they don't really know how to express their emotions, but because of that makes them smarter than you.
no, that
And
just
it's
means
this
they have to
like
work harder.
that's true. I mean, it means they would have to work harder if they try.
Yeah.
But they don't always try. So then you have people like Elon who doesn't try and doesn't even care to try because it's made out to seem as if that inability to feel emotion makes him more objective and more logical, because we've been inundated with things like Spock to make it seem like it's like either or. You can either be logical or you can be emotional. You can't be both.
That's like missing, that right there misses the entire point of Spock. Spock shows us how difficult the
Right,
world is
yeah.
when all we see the world through is the lens of logic and rationality. When the world itself is a chaotic and tumultuous place where we can't predict anything. Well, we can predict a few things a few seconds in front of us, but not too far. And Spock had like incredible trouble navigating all of those waters because he was always going to be a child of two worlds. He was like, Worf had the same problem, of course, but I think in a lot of ways we wouldn't have been able to even have a Worf type experience without Spock's version of the child of two worlds in the context of Star Trek. But I think that's like critically important that, it wasn't easy for Spock. I think he was super chill all the time because he was like, fuck, how do I respond to this shit?
Right.
Fascinating was just his way of saying like, oh boy, here we go again.
Well, it was also condescending
Well,
most of
that
the
too.
time. And even down to the times when he would like lose control of his emotions, it was meant to show that he was always keeping those things in check, and it was just something that like impaired his capacity to hold them back. That
Yeah.
now you saw them, and it was like they were always there.
Yeah.
Same with Tuvok.
Yeah. I wonder how much energy they expend just like keeping their systems, like keeping everything in check. Like if they didn't.
Ton, because that's
Yeah.
what was like making Tuvok sick when he got the Palm Far.
Yeah.
He
Like-
was like fucked up.
Man, that means that like they might actually be best served by laboratory conditions.
Right. Well, and it's the same thing with
That's why Vulcan
I
ships
forget
are
that
so
dude's
sterile.
name. And when he had the Ponfar and Balana,
Oh yeah.
whatever the fuck that dude's name was, it like
Yeah, the engineer.
he got real inappropriate and was like,
Yeah.
"Nah, man, fuck you. You can't use this as an excuse. We know other Vulcans can keep that shit in check." So that's why his story was more egregious, is because we've seen other people go through the Ponfar.
Yeah.
Again,
They just
those
didn't know
things
that
were not
music.
accidental. It's not, it's not. They didn't tell those stories on accident.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like, hey guys, let's accidentally retell a story. Let's just change the names. We'll do a bunch of copy pasta.
Yeah. But, and that's, that gets back to the creativity shit, though. That's
Yeah.
like ultimately why having everything get moved away from creativity for the sake of creativity and things only being viable if they can be made a profit from, or have a profit made from it.
If it can't be turned into a product, then it's of no use to capitalism.
Yeah.
I think that's also something that has to be learned. That can't just be like explained. I think that's why there's so many businesses that fail, is they fail to turn what they do into a product. And in some instances it works. Like sometimes you have artisanal this or bespoke that, and those things work out because those people are very uniquely situated. They won the geographic lottery, and they're in the right place to serve a very specific market, and they have a unique set of skills that lends itself to that kind of service. But that's rare anymore. I don't think that like a true service-based industry outside of like, I mean, I don't even think the food industry can survive as a service industry. But I'm probably,
No.
I might be wrong, but I don't think it can.
No, it can't. It can't. Not the way it's structured. You go to Europe and it's not structured the same way.
Yeah. I just, it's one of those things where a lot of things that do exist, like the shining stars of whatever market that somebody's really dialed into, those people just get lucky. Like the vast majority, I think it's like 80% of businesses fail in the first 2 years.
Yeah, and then it's like 90% by the next 5.
Yeah. And that's if they're lucky. And then like the remaining 10%, the remaining 10% who get through, most of them are still running like in the red for another 5 years.
Yep. It takes like roughly 7 years for a lot of businesses to get out of the red, if they make it to 7 years, which is where, again, it's like, that's not a viable trajectory.
No, not at all. So yeah, somebody has to be really lucky. They've got to be in the right place with the right model at the right time. They've got to be willing to take excessive risks. But
I think they're also told that they should continue growing and infinite growth is like, this gets back to that model doesn't fucking work.
No.
So if people's models were about sustainability, maybe more would make it past 5 years. Instead of like, make as much money as possible, as fast as possible, with as cheap a quality product as possible. And your reputation, it don't matter.
Well,
as long as you're selling shit, it don't matter.
Well, if the goal is to make the business the product and sell it to a larger competitor,
God.
that was the
Jesus Christ.
That was the myth of the 80s, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man. That shit never
build a business and sell out.
Like, that never made sense to me.
What?
It doesn't. Like, if you have a viable business, why would you sell it? Why would you get rid of it? And it's like, clearly there's something wrong if somebody's like exiting the business when they are saying it's the peak viability. Why are you leaving then? Wouldn't you just want to stay here and make more money? Or are you selling me fucking a dream? Just too many Americans not wanting to do math because math isn't fun. I just want to go to work. I don't want to become a business owner. I want to become a restaurant owner. I just own the restaurant. And people come in and work, make the food, and I come in and own the restaurant
and own the restaurant. Yeah, eat the food, make the money, own the restaurant.
I don't need any management skills. I don't need any charisma. I don't need to make people want to work for me.
Just hire a manager to make that happen, right?
Yeah, the manager will do that part.
Yeah, that's what I pay. That's what they get paid for, right? To make everyone else happy.
As many times as I've seen that attitude on Hell's Kitchen, you would think that business school has a class on becoming a business owner, and step one and the only step is hire a manager. You got the money, hire a manager, and then case closed. You're done.
So that's
money comes in.
That means that they really need to send people to management school.
Right. I mean, but they do. That's like, yeah. There's a whole project management degrees called PMP, like PMP certification. And it's like, yeah, people who become managers generally should have some sort of educational background. But no, you can just get hired on as a manager in corporate America anywhere. Like, I work at Starbucks. I can manage it now. I've worked here.
Yeah, man. I mean, I made a hamburger once. I can totally run Burger King.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Have you eaten a hamburger? Have you eaten French fries? Oh, yeah, you can manage it.
Yeah, man. If you've eaten a French fry, you know everything there is to know about it.
Oh, my God. But that's how Americans approach a lot of shit. And it's really, we're at the end of the possible run on it, and that's where I'm like pointing at 24-hour. Like there's no 24-hour Walmart anymore. There's no 24-hour Burger King, no 24-hour McDonald's. I think IHOP might be the only thing I've seen.
What about Denny's? Denny's was like a stalwart of the 24-hour breakfast.
That one, I don't know if they ever stopped being 24 hours, and that's where I know IHOP did briefly.
I'm not saying like I miss.
No, Denny's closes at 10, bro. Denny's closes at 10.
Whoa!
Ooh. Holy shit! There you go. 12 a.m. to 10 p.m.
How can they stay in? Well, how can they stay? But okay, I guess. I mean, who has time to go to Denny's other than like from 8 p.m. till 6 in the morning? Like that's the only time anyone actually has free time to go to Denny's.
Okay, so check it. Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, they close. Like they close for 2 hours on Sunday, 4 hour. Wait, no, that's 8 hours. 8 hours on Monday, and fucking 6 hours on Tuesday. But then there's 24 hours Wednesday through Saturday.
Okay.
So but that's like fucking. You can't even do a full week of 24 hours now. That's Denny's.
Really,
that's
weird.
Fucking Denny's. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Denny's.
That's fucking Denny's, man.
That means that there's 3 days of the week that like nocturnal people can't get their fucking moons over my hammy and shit.
Right. And that's again,
that's not cool.
I mean, but that's a sign of the sense of like, yeah, Denny's isn't 24 hours every day a week anymore. That's a big fucking deal. That's a big goddamn deal.
Yeah,
I don't think Americans
brand.
would understand what kind of deal that is unless they've lived through enough decades to see the rise of like 30-minute or less delivery, or else it's free, and then the fall of that, and then like the rise of the fucking 24-hour like restaurant, and you know, the Denny's and the Waffle Houses had been around, but Waffle House specifically is one of the places that is like hasn't really changed their model much, but that's why they persisted. But I bet, you know, I don't think that Waffle House in Bloomington isn't there anymore, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like the diner looking Waffle House chain doesn't exist in Bloomington. I think the Waffle House that exists in Bloomington is like a franchise that they bought out.
So it looks like the ones that are left still are 24 hours.
But those are like, seriously, those are like diners, roadside diner sized buildings. They're not even like real Waffle Houses. They're not even like building. They're not even Denny's sized. I don't know. I like Waffle House, oddly enough. It's one of those like weird greasy experiences that I don't seek out. But if I happen to find myself like hungry and like lo and behold, that's what's available, I'm not going to complain. I'll actually go out and get like the corned beef hash and a waffle and some bacon and some eggs and probably regret it all later that day. But it'll be worth it then. It'll be delicious and greasy then. And that's what matters in that moment. And it's worth, you know, the amount of time I've got to sit and wait it out.
Well, there were chains that depended upon drunk people having low standards, but also being willing to come in at like 2 and 3 a.m. and spend whatever amount of money. And I think that's where they also went through their growing and culling pains already before the pandemic. So it's like, yeah, the Waffle Houses that were left can still operate as 24 hours because they already had their fucking the culling of the
they had their
unnecessary Waffle House locations.
They had their regulars.
Yep, and the regulars would keep their
their poor liver, their kidneys. Oh.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what it felt like whenever you go into a Waffle House. It's like, oh, there was an air of like sadness and despair because everyone in there is like the only place they can get any food and they're thankful for it, but everyone has like dealt with that. And it's like, that's why you know it's not the best sausage you can get. You know it's not the best actual waffle you can get. You know it's not the best pancake or egg. In fact, the eggs were usually terrible and often under-seasoned or like cooked horribly.
I'm not even
but
sure
it's
the
like,
eggs were actually egg.
Yeah. But when you don't really have a choice, it'll do. And that's what Waffle House always felt like at fucking 2 a.m. when you just like left a rave or left a, you know, and that's where again, it's not, there was no delusion that it was like gourmet, but that's also why I don't think
if you wanted the illusion of
persist.
gourmet breakfast at 3 a.m, you'd go to Denny's and gaze at their menu. And then when it finally came in front of you, you say, what the hell is this? He's like, that's what you ordered.
Yeah.
At least Denny's has really good pictures of their food.
Yeah.
They've got great product photography, and that's the thing, is they serve a product, and that's why I think that's why they ultimately will survive, even if they have to take a big hit and are willing to survive under levels that most restaurants would be like, fuck this shit, we're out. You know, Denny's will persist, Waffle House will persist, because as you've pointed out, they've got their regulars. Man, I I wonder how many Denny's there are that are still at like Flying J or travel plazas on interstates, because I bet those things get plenty of business. I wonder how many businesses are kept alive by interstate commerce, like by interstate travel specifically.
Well, that's where I know a lot of Marriotts and fucking what's it called? Best Westerns and
Yeah.
what was that place? Motel 6. Yeah, because man, there's like Howard Johnson's. There's like random.
Howard Johnson, that's a business I haven't thought of in years. That's another
Yeah,
Denny's like place. At
but there's
Denny's,
all these staples of like um truck stops,
yeah, like the Flying
like
J,
Flying J.
yeah,
There you go.
or
Yeah,
the Love's Travel Plazas.
yeah, and there's things like that where um man, I bet they probably didn't need to keep running commercials or something.
Yeah, I bet
That's why we don't see this shit anymore.
yeah, I bet all they need is like a billboard on the interstate, like 3 miles before the exit, and that's all the advertising they need in either direction. And they'll have tens of thousands of people see those billboards every day, and at least 10% will stop at the gas station to buy something and fuel up, because they've got taquitos or tornadoes. I wonder how many people the truck stop is like. That's it. Like that's like the social interaction that they get every day is only at the truck stop. Is it just truckers? I mean, and people on the interstate. Like, I wonder what that does to people. Because I know that's a thing. I know that there are people who are like going on road trips, because we went on a road trip and I saw dozens upon dozens of other people who were clearly not driving a truck and or hauling something, and they were going someplace for vacation. I wonder what like extended exposure to that environment actually does to people. I mean, maybe there's something more to like the long term psychological effects of being on the road that is not really reported or researched at all.
Oh, definitely, and I think that's one of the reasons that they have to have like movies and more propaganda to reinforce the notion that people need to be taking road trips constantly, and that it's like part of the ubiquitous American experience, because then it's like it makes you not realize that you're kind of landlocked in the sense of it's really actually difficult to travel abroad, more difficult than it should be, and then it gives this sense of like, oh, traveling in America is like this, like everybody's Jack Kerouac if you go on a fucking road trip, and it's like it's not that.
Whoa, wait,
it's
wait.
not that epic. Most of the time,
I must have missed the line where they were handing out like flasks and heroin or something. Because that's like on the road is definitely not what road tripping is about, at least for me.
um, but it's like Fear and Loathing, I think, give people this notion of, I mean, it's not just Fear and Loathing, fucking Hangover. There's so many like National Lampoon's Road Trip. There are literal movies about that adventure process being something that Americans need to like go through in order to like have that rite of passage where it's like it romanticizes all of the good parts and leaves out all of the bad parts
Fuck
in
no,
a way
those
where
movies also romanticize all of the horrible, calamitous shit that doesn't get planned for, and they somehow spend their way into saving their asses.
yeah.
Like my road trips by that measure are like unfun because I'm really good at planning that stuff out, and nothing unplanned happens unless somebody else unplans it for me. And usually they're not part of my group. They're like some rando on the interstate.
Well, and I wasn't even thinking of like the surreal like situations that they bring up, but I'm thinking of like the shit where you like check into your hotel and there's fucking hair everywhere.
Yeah.
Is that type of shit? Is that type of unexpected shit where you're like, okay, well, or like you check into your hotel and there's fucking ants in the room.
Or you turn on, you flip a switch and a fan turns on, but the fan's not in your room.
Right? Yeah. It's like it doesn't like the actual terrible or like when you're fucking driving along and you're in traffic, stuck in like unmoving traffic, and now you have to take a shit. Nowhere near a truck stop, nowhere near anything. Like that shit sucks. That part of travel fucking sucks. So there's like a lot of it where beyond the infrastructure just making things more difficult, the actual downsides of travel just make it so that where I'm like, you know, I've done road trips in the past and it's fun when like when you plan everything and everything goes to plan, it is fun. But America has a perpetual way of making things not work out the way you planned them.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a fucking flash flood or
Man, when the
like
roads,
traffic.
when the mountain road floods as you're driving on it, that's pretty unplannable.
Yeah.
And when you get to the
Exactly.
bottom of that mountain road and you're getting ready to pull off at the rest area, it says rest area closed, and you say, "Oh crap!"
You just got lucky.
Well, I mean,
And that's where I'm like,
Yeah.
I mean, you planned as well as you could, but the luck is what puts you an hour ahead or like 24 hours ahead or whatever you were ahead
Yeah.
of the flash flood that you could not have anticipated. Like, unless you were completely in line with the fucking stars and the moon and the ecosystem, and you knew when every goddamn molecule moved and you could
I don't-
feel it
I
in
don't-
your soul.
I don't think
unless
that,
you
I don't
knew
believe
that
that
deep.
I don't believe that humans have that kind of spiritual omniscience.
Right.
At least not
I don't
me.
I've never seen it.
Yeah.
It would be cool, but unless that person exists, you would not have been able to plan for a fucking flash flood.
Nope.
And that's where I'm like, all the planning also takes luck.
You know, even
so
with
that you don't
Google
get stuck.
even with Google telling you where a rest area is, you can't know that the rest area actually is closed until you see the sign that says rest area closed, and then
Yep.
you can't know that they had conveniently placed like porta potties that you wouldn't use anyways until you drive by the place and see the entire parking lot full. But you know, like it was full, so it's not like I could have found a tree anyways, which would have been preferable to the porta potty. I'm serious. It's like it was like it was like a barbecue. There were they were tailgating. There were so many vehicles, and they were just people everywhere. We're talking about like a mountain rest area. Probably has like 4 urinals and 4 stalls, and then on the men's side, and probably has, you know, because equality and stuff, only like 6 toilet stalls, but they have an extra pair of sinks in the ladies' room or some bullshit. But the whole place was packed, like not just packed, but like cars parked out almost to the exit, where it splits and says cars and vans, cars, trucks, vans here, trucks with trailers here. You know, it was lined with vehicles. So it's not like people were paying attention to the closed sign. They were just going to go there and drop the deuce anyways.
Oof.
No facilities, no running water. It's like the worst part of a festival, except they're expecting to leave immediately and get right back on a 70-mile-an-hour interstate. We pulled into one that was like that and decided just to leave because it was so full. And then the best part is like immediately afterwards, like Google said that there has been an accident. You will be delayed 20 minutes. And it's like, what? We never even saw the accident. By the time we got to the place where the accident was, it was all cleared up. But Google was playing with our ETA emotions. Like, I don't know. Google's has done a really good job of integrating all the Waze technology and helping people to communicate in terms of like, here's a roadblock, or there's a speed trap, or here's a wreck, or here's a, the traffic slowdown stuff. That stuff's all improved since Alphabet bought Waze. But even with all of that, the interconnectedness that we've got, it's still, man, sometimes it still sends us in the wrong directions, or gives us like poor advice. It's like it's trying to be too helpful. It's like, oh, if you do this, we can do this thing. Oh, but if you change your mind now, we can go do this and it'll save a few minutes. And it's like, how many minutes? 2. Well, that doesn't change anything for me, so.
Yeah, it was like really useful when they added the speed traps to the maps, but then the fucking cops started messing with the speed trap on Waze and on Google.
Yeah, they're like, no, there's no speed trap here.
Yeah. So, man.
Speed trap. Yeah. No, that's not what it is. There should be some kind of. I'm sure that somebody's figured out they need to add some kind of sanity check. Like if the vehicle that's reporting the speed trap isn't moving, then it can't report a speed trap is false.
Yeah.
You guys can have that for free. I know you're listening because we're streaming it to YouTube. So add that feature. If they're not moving, they can't say one way or another. It means that they're the police. Or they're being pulled over. Either way, they shouldn't be on their phone.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, I wonder the way that Tesla is framing automated vehicles and like self-driving vehicles.
I hope California wins. I hope they win their suit.
Well, the issue is like, it feels like Google is in a better position to deploy the software that would be utilized within vehicles to communicate with other vehicles rather than leaving that up to the individual car companies. But it's like, that would also then fall on them. Whereas, like, they didn't ask for that responsibility specifically, but when you create this infrastructure that tracks people's data by their phone when they're in their vehicles, it seems relevant that data should be then utilized to inform autonomous vehicle, like, distance between other vehicles. And that's like, it shouldn't be. I mean, I don't know if autonomous vehicles are ever actually going to be ubiquitous on the road. I think they've been largely oversold. But the reason I think that they're not going to be on the road is because these fucking companies aren't working together. And they're trying to build this shit in silos as if their solution can work without talking to other people's cars. So
I don't like the idea of being in a vehicle that I'm not operating yet. I just haven't come to terms with it, I guess.
I mean, I don't like it in the presence of other people operating their vehicles, but we already ride trains.
That's true.
So
but
it's
they
like
have an
if
engineer
it
operating
was
it.
operating it.
right, but I mean, and even then, yeah, it is somebody. But it's like we're not in control of the vehicle. But as long as that train isn't operating on the same road where another vehicle isn't on tracks, then there's no real problem. And that's kind of where, like in places where you see trains and vehicles cross over, they have stoplights for both. In both of those, it's like they'll have the stoplight for the train, they'll have the stoplight for the cars, and they never conflict. But and that's where again I'm like, we have them in big cities, but the way that they're being framed is as if they're also going to be operating on roads with people who are still driving their own vehicles, and that to me is where it's like again the other person is always the problem.
Yeah. I mean, they'll eventually require that vehicles have some kind of intervehicular communications system. I know V2V just lost their spectrum, but I think that can be handled with some kind of Internet of Things level communication. If everyone's broadcasting a IoT Wi-Fi channel on the vehicle Wi-Fi channel, then they can all just join the distributed net. But
and that's where Google's in a better place to do that than Tesla.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or God forbid, even Meta. But again, we know that these companies can't be trusted not to sell that data, which is why it's like I don't want it to actually be Google. I'd rather it be a trustable third party. But I know in this type of situation, it would be better to trust Google as that third party than expect the individual car companies to actually let their vehicles communicate with each other.
I don't think. I mean, every time Ford and GM, or Ford and Dodge, or Ford and anyone have actually tried to partner on anything, Ford seems to get screwed somehow. But then, because they put the bulk of the effort into developing it, they actually benefit in the long run. Like, the assembly line. And the dude had a pretty sordid history with like the guys who started GM and Dodge and Cadillac. But I think that's actually what has to happen. It's not going to happen if we wait for Google to figure it out, or wait for Apple to figure it out, or wait for Sony or whomever. Tesla's not going to figure it out either, because they don't actually play ball. They're just in it for themselves. I think Toyota could probably pull it off because they like to work with other companies.
Yeah.
But I think that in America, it's going to be a group effort, or it's not going to happen. They're all going to have to figure out how to make their vehicles communicate. They're going to have to agree on a standard. Maybe get the some kind of standards organization involved. But they'll have to agree on something. Otherwise, the future of vehicles that they all promise just can't materialize.
Well, and I think that's where the government investing in infrastructure is like incentivizing car companies to build more interoperable battery or charging interfaces. But I'm not sure like what companies are going to take advantage of those things to keep their own intellectual property closed off, or if they're going to do it to get the benefits. So that's where it is like Ford's plans up until I think they're what was it? I think it's 2035. They're trying to have everything electric because the European laws have it so that they're not going to be able to sell combustible vehicles. Like nobody will be able to sell combustibles by 2035, I believe. So I think that ultimately is not forcing American companies, but if American companies want to continue participating in the European market, they're going to have to be as electric as possible to continue producing there. I mean, they'll have to be all electric, but it's more so their factories would have to have as much capacity to produce electric vehicles as possible versus like how much of them focus on combustion right now. And I think like Ford has explicitly come out and said they're trying to shift towards as much in electric as possible by 2035. But I considering they already made the Mustang electric, I don't think that they're going to hold on to anything combusting except for like one-off vehicles or like the GT90 or some shit that are just brand unique vehicles that are still like, you know what? They'll probably make it an electric GT90 because it will probably be faster than combustion anyway.
Well, it probably already is. I mean,
yeah. So, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if auto manufacturers are ready to replace. What about like entire companies like Cummins diesel engines? Are the goal to get people away from internal combustion? Does that include the totality of the trucking industry in 13 years?
Well, I know, that was the Nikola Motors grift, but even Tesla was trying to promote semi trucks.
He was trying to promote the semi trucks in China just a few days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know.
But again, if they can't deliver a Cybertruck, they're not going to be able to deliver a semi truck. It's a market. I don't think that it's impossible. More so,
it's just improbable.
Yeah, because I think the issue becomes when we're talking about towing all that weight, the amount of power that would be needed is just something that's probably not feasible to put in the size of a semi truck. Like the semi truck would probably have to be, like the actual cab would probably have to be as long as the trailer itself.
Yeah,
to hold enough power.
My understanding
is
battery technology just isn't there yet for that kind of requirement. Yeah. Gasoline has like a 50-to-1 potential energy factor over our current best lithium batteries that are in vehicles, and diesel has even greater energy potential. So it's just a volume issue. There's no way they can stack enough of those batteries in something and make it meaningful, because it's got to pull the weight of all those batteries even after they're empty or partially discharged. And then, of course, recharge rates. That's the big issue. Diesel trucks are only really useful. They only make their money when they're running. And if they've got to wait 24 hours, 12 hours or whatever to recharge, or 6 hours to swap a battery out, that's just not going to fly. They're going to have to change things. We're going to have to change the whole model of freight transport and last mile transportation of goods. It's all going to have to change if they really genuinely want to transition away from internal combustion. Or the commercial industry is going to run internal combustion until they decide to stop. And basically everyone else is changing everything about the way they drive to satisfy a very small portion of the goal, because consumers can't possibly shoulder the entire responsibility of commercial trucking in terms of like environmental impact. There's just no way.
So I found someone did make an electric GT40 Everati, and it's
I bet it's lightning
estimated
fast.
that it had 800 horsepower, and it's twice as powerful as the most powerful version of the GT40.
I mean, I'm not surprised. That makes perfect sense.
Huh. Well, and then the weight distribution is actually seemingly improved because of the way that the batteries are distributed. So I feel like it works for supercars, but it doesn't work for towing because there's too much weight involved.
Well, like when Mercedes made the electric SLS, and it was like a whole like 5 seconds faster than the gas SLS, even though it weighed an extra 1,000 pounds. They called it a success. They're like, we've proved that it's faster, that we can make one. We're done. We don't need to do it again. But what they also revealed was that to do that, it used the same amount of energy that a gas-powered SLS would use to drive like a whole, 500 something miles, like a full tank of gas, like just cruising around, because it's a V12 Mercedes. You don't have to drive it like a sports car just because it is a sports car. It's still a Mercedes. You can drive it as slow as you want. But, like the actual, like the amount of energy that it uses is just insane. And so it only has like a, 120 mile range or something dumb, because it's a sports car and it goes fast. But I don't think that that's like actually fun. I think the fun in, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the fun in a car like that is that you go drive it for, hundreds of miles on some long extended drive, and you just see where it takes you. Maybe that's like romanticizing the road too much.
Well, but that gets back to the notion of like, what road allows you to do that in America?
I mean, none. You just kind of keep driving, and you hit some stop signs, and you turn left a few times, you turn right a few more times, and you get on an interstate, and you drive for a while, and you get honked at by somebody, and then you pass somebody else, and you get off so you can get really bad tacos and have to pee in a room that smells god awful, and then you get back on the road, and you get out of the car at the end of the drive, and your back's all stiff, and your legs don't work, and your left foot's asleep, and your knee is also got a weird kink in it now because it's been sitting in the same position the whole time.
And you can't feel one of your butt cheeks, but you're not sure which one. And it's like, yeah. I don't know, man. I that theoretical, like, just hop in the car and drive 300 miles, 400 miles is like, it just doesn't really exist anywhere.
No, it doesn't.
And I think that's what the idea that they're selling, but the reality is just so disconnected from that.
Or you have to be willing to drive like on really old roads that nobody drives on anymore, and go, real slow, because the roads are not well maintained. They don't have a shoulder. You might not see a gas station for 60 miles. No cell phone service. I mean, I guess no cell phone service is more authentic, actually. Have to break out the map. Have to read a physical paper map again. That's not terrible, but it's not great. have no idea. Well, no. Some maps, like a really good atlas, that has markers for the mile markers are indicated. But then that also goes back to one has to understand how to read all of the signage on the interstates.
Well, it's funny because now that you pointed out, taking road trips used to be getting in the car and getting lost, and so you weren't lost anymore. Because a lot of times the directions you got were like outdated, or there was a detour or some shit.
Or they didn't include any street names. They were just like landmarks.
Yeah, so
go
it's
4 miles past some landmark.
Oh my god, yeah. Landmark-based directions. Woo.
Yeah, you're going to turn right after you see the 3rd red mailbox. It'll be the 5th mailbox.
Well, I've actually seen there are gender differences in how directions are given and how they are better received. So like men are better at receiving directions if they are oriented based on the specific actions and not based on landmarks, whereas women are generally better at landmark oriented directions. So it's like, it's not, so if a man gives landmark oriented directions to another man, it's probably going to be like have problems. Whereas if a man gives like specific direct orientation, like directions, it's not going to be as much of a problem. And it's like, it generally falls along gender lines, and it's like they don't know if it's cultural or like because of neuron firing based on chemicals. So it's like, this is not the same type of thing where it's like, oh, women are not worse at math. They're just not given the same access to support early on. So it ends up like making it seem like men are better at math when that's not actually the case. There's no there's no difference in how men and women process math, but there is a cultural difference in how they're treated. Whereas now it's not clear as to like if the difference in map reading is due to culture or if it's like a hormonal influence or whatever. And I think that's like, there are things about the way hormones and chemical balances affect behavior, but then they're like, now they're discovering that hormonal balance is not really like causally linked to depression in the same way that they thought it was. It like correlates with depression in many times, but it's not necessarily causally linked. So it's like changes in hormonal balance may put a person in better condition to improve their depression, but it's not always going to be like correcting a chemical imbalance doesn't always solve depression. And that's like the difference between them being correlated and caused. And I think we're getting to a point where we're getting better at articulating the difference, but a lot of people still think that the causal link is what they're seeing instead of a correlational link. But you know, this gets back into American or lack of understanding of laboratory conditions versus real world.
I mean, does that hold true like even across like socioeconomic strata? Like the directional thing, the directional direction is preference.
I'm fairly positive it does, which is why I think it became.
That's really surreal.
Yeah, because then it'll get misapplied, and then you'll see studies where it's like men have a better sense of direction than women. It's like actually no, it's because the approach to the directions has to be congruous, whereas understanding that men are more likely to orient better towards direct and specific directions rather than landmarks. Yeah, there's all kinds of studies on the differences in gender and direction. Yeah, because then it's like women get better with cardinal references, whereas mileage references are roughly equal.
Huh.
And it's like there's decades and decades of research on this. And that's where it's funny, because the whole reason I'm saying this is because the research will often be like framed as if men are better at directions, but it's not men being better at directions so much as the direction giving and the direction receiving has to have congruous expectations or congruous understanding, and it's usually oriented towards male direction giving, which is why women are not good at receiving
and
directions oriented towards men.
And they've determined that there's like no issues with the methodology of like data collection.
I mean, it's not even about the issues, because it's been proven under so many different conditions. Like again, this is decades and decades of research on this specific thing, because the difference emerged early on that they've been trying to understand why the difference exists. So it's very clear it has nothing to do with like socioeconomics, but as to why it's along a gender line is still not clear. And it's like hard to tell because there are neuronal or there are implications within the neurons that show that there's a difference along gender lines, but they don't know why the neurons behave differently along gender lines, whether it's because of hormones or because of cultural acclimation.
Interesting.
It's like it's insane how much research there is on this.
And they keep coming up with the same result.
Yes, which is why it's reproducible.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's why, again, it's like this is the issue of observing something but not knowing what you're observing, because they can see the difference, they can spot the difference, they can repeat the difference, but they don't know why the difference is there. So when people go to assert the reason behind the difference, that's the step too far. The difference is, it's like you can't actually deny the difference, and this is one of the reasons where it's not clear on why the difference is there, because we have not had enough time or data with like cisgender versus transgender. But now that we have are starting to get more data on transgender, if like somebody transitions and whichever way they transition, their map reading capacity starts to change one way or the other, it will then be easier to start to figure out why. But they still won't be able to articulate why, because every person's transition is going to be unique. So it's like even then they won't be able to find causation. They'll only be able to find correlation.
So can I give like a man some estrogen or a woman some testosterone and then see how they respond to it?
Yeah, that would be the scientific way to see if it's hormone, like if it's a hormonal induced difference. Like that would be the easiest and most variable, reductive, And in fact, it would be so reductive that it would probably be poor methodology.
Yeah.
Which is why they probably wouldn't do it that way. So,
Yeah.
but you'd be able to articulate, yeah, we find a difference or we don't find a difference. So that specific test, that's how they would scientifically prove, like, yeah, if men and women have a different, no, men and women do have a difference in how they read maps. It might be hormones, it might be cultural. We don't know. We're going to test the hormones. That's how they would.
Yeah.
That would be the most viable way to actually test that hypothesis. Really,
It sounds so inelegant. It sounds very ham-fisted. Hey, we're gonna stick you full of hormones to see how you respond to directions.
yeah. It's just there've been studies that'll find, quote unquote, men park better than women and they park faster and more accurately than women. It's well, society rewards men for being good drivers and doesn't reward women for being good drivers. So is that why? Or is I have a hard time believing gender has anything to do with a person's capacity to operate a fucking vehicle, because we haven't had cars for that long.
You know, the Navy, I think it was the Navy and the Air Force both conducted studies on pilots, and they determined that female pilots were able to track more objects, keep track of more independent objects in a spatial environment.
Yep. More objects, but then men have quicker reaction times.
Yeah.
So there's all these differences where there are clear differences.
Yeah,
between
there are
sexes.
actually clear differences.
Yeah.
Documented, empirical evidence.
Yep.
It's not just
but they don't know why.
Yeah.
Well, they can make assumptions in the sense of the male that was more genetically inclined to be the hunter would have a higher rod count or a higher cone count, which would make his fine vision better, whereas a woman would have higher rod count, which would make her able to see things in her periphery better. And it's little things like that, whereas men need to be able to see things in their periphery quickly to react, but they don't need to be able to see things in their periphery in a fine manner, and it needs to be more focused on what's in your target that you're trying to hunt. So these are the evolutionary theories behind why these vision differences in vision, or some these aren't the only ones, but these are some of the things that people in psychological and brain sciences have posited that might be the source of these differences. But then you'd have to go somewhere where they have a patriarchal society where women also hunt to see if there is no difference. And then if that society had the same differences, then it would be well, it doesn't have anything to do with hunting and gathering, and we can rule that out. But it would take a lot of exposure to different cultures with a long history of not having gender role separated activities within society to know if it was the gender roles being separated over thousands of years that did it, or if it was just the hormones.
I wonder if any of our I wonder if there are any psychological conditions or diagnoses that are really just some exaggerated hunter-gatherer response or behavior, as a reaction to an environment where those traits are either.
Do you know the origin of the term hysteria?
No.
Well, let me explain. Hysteria is literally something that was at one time thought to only afflict women, which is where that, and then lunacy.
I know lunacy is for moon gazers.
Right, but this is specifically because women had what's the word? Hysterectical susception to insanity. So, like, then one of the solutions for hysteria was a masturbatory aid. So women would then, if they were hysterical, they would basically be vibrated into orgasm to get rid of their hysteria. That was like one of the medical fucking
What?
like
They're having a
like
really.
I'm not making this
They
up.
were having a really bad day, so they threw a dildo at them.
Yeah, it's like one of the like it's like one of the weirdest segments of American history. But when you have like women being classified as hysterical and then the doctors prescribing orgasm as their solution for hysteria, clearly there's like a patriarchal lean in the way things are being classified. But then when people are like actively like, it's not a coincidence that you didn't know that period existed. And it's like it's not everywhere that the hysteria was being treated that way, but it was enough that it's like an actual thing where you're like, they hid that shit from most Americans because it's fucked up. If you knew, I mean, and it's not the only thing that was happening. It's like, oh, if you got tuberculosis, if you had any sort of illness, any sort of mental illness, they would fucking put you in this place and you'd be subject to all sorts of weird ass experimentation when they're trying to figure out what was wrong with you. But because society was very lax with like human lives, it's like, well, let's try to masturbate him out of the hysteria. It's like, yeah,
Oh my god.
times were fucking weird, man. But again, the only reason I even asked if you knew about it is because the way it's framed, it's not like you'll be able to find enough information proving what I just told you definitely happened, but the way that it then got hyperbolized, it didn't go as far as people were like, it wasn't like prevalent all over the country. It was like prevalent in these little pockets where you'd get these little pockets of fucking perverts that would use the unknown to exploit people. And it's like the same thing with the War of the Worlds broadcast. It's like, yeah, you get pockets of people who believed it, but by and large, most people didn't actually flip out about it in the same way that like, now if we see some shit with Russia, like most Americans don't flip out. Whereas 20 years ago, or I guess maybe 40 years ago, if somebody heard like, oh, they've got their nukes ready, people would be hiding in their fucking basements for about a couple of years, and then that shit gets worn off, and people don't do that shit anymore. But again, there's these like the periods of not understanding what's happening with our bodies when we're trying to understand what's happening. We're gonna do some weird ass shit, and then we'll understand. Like right now, yeah, there's a difference between the way men and women do certain things, but it's not because necessarily they have different genitals. Like there's a ton of other reasons why. And it's usually not that simple.
I just have a genitals for navigation. That's just so fucked up. Hold on, let me get out my directionals.
Hand the map to the person with the dick.
God. Hold on, he's get his dick out. Let's see where we're going.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live on Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Exceptional Radio.